A chilling scream echoes through Blackthorn Manor, where shadows whisper of betrayal and a ghost demands justice. Why does Eleanor Harrow's spirit haunt these halls? What secrets do the family hide? Join Miss Marple as she unravels a deadly mystery before the darkness claims another soul. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. Rain pattered softly against the windows of Miss Marple's cosy cottage in St. Mary Mead, a gentle rhythm that matched the click of her knitting needles. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room where she sat with a cup of tea and a letter that had arrived that morning. The envelope, edged with a faint gold trim, bore the crest of Blackthorn Manor, a name that stirred a distant memory. Miss Jane Marple, with her sharp eyes and sharper mind, slit it open with a silver letter opener, her curiosity already alight. The letter was from Lady Beatrice Harrow, a school friend from decades past, whose elegant handwriting belied the urgency of her words. Beatrice wrote of troubling events at Blackthorn Manor, her family's ancestral home in the remote moors of northern England. Strange noises echoed through the halls at night, lights flickered without cause, and the family Beatrice, her son, Edmund, and his fiancée, Clara, lived in a state of unease. "I fear we are not alone in this house," Beatrice wrote, her pen strokes wavering. "Your knack for seeing through puzzles, dear Jane, is our only hope. Will you come?" Miss Marple set the letter down, her lips pursing thoughtfully. She remembered Beatrice as a proud, poised woman, not given to flights of fancy. If Beatrice was unsettled, something was truly amiss. The prospect of a mystery, tangled with whispers of the supernatural, was too intriguing to resist. By noon, she had packed a modest suitcase, her knitting tucked inside, and boarded a train bound for the moors. The journey was long, the train rattling through rolling hills that gave way to desolate mist-shrouded landscapes. As dusk fell, the station at Thornwick, a tiny platform dwarfed by gnarled oaks, came into view. A driver in a weathered coat awaited her, his face half hidden by a cap. "Miss Marple for Blackthorn Manor." He grunted, taking her bag without ceremony. She nodded, noting the man's calloused hands and the faint tremor in them, as if the manor's name alone set him on edge. The drive was silent, save for the crunch of gravel under the car's tires and the moan of wind across the moors. Blackthorn Manor emerged from the fog like a spectre, its Gothic spires piercing the sky, windows glinting like eyes in the fading light. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and the air carried a damp, earthy scent tinged with something metallic. Miss Marple's heart quickened not from fear, but from the thrill of a puzzle waiting to be unravelled. The great oak doors creaked open, revealing a cavernous hall lit by a chandelier that swayed faintly, though no breeze stirred within. Lady Beatrice Harrow stood at the foot of a grand staircase, her silver hair swept into a tight bun, her emerald eyes clouded with worry. She wore a velvet gown that seemed to belong to another era, its deep blue catching the light. "Jane, you came," she said, her voice a mix of relief and strain as she clasped Miss Marple's hands. "I feared you'd think me mad." "Nonsense, Beatrice," Miss Marple replied, her tone warm but probing. "You were never one for idle tales. Tell me everything." Beatrice led her to a drawing-room where a fire roared, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill in the air. The room was opulent, with mahogany furniture and tapestries depicting hunting scenes, but the shadows seemed to cling to the corners, heavy and watchful. Two others awaited: Edmund Harrow, Beatrice's son, a tall man in his 30s with sharp cheekbones and a guarded expression; and Clara Vane, his fiancée, a striking woman with auburn hair and a smile that flickered like a candle in the wind. Edmund rose stiffly, offering a curt nod. "Mother insists on dragging outsiders into our affairs," he said, his voice clipped. "No offense, Miss Marple, but this is a family matter." Clara's laugh was light, almost forced. "Oh, Edmund, don't be so dour. Miss Marple, I'm delighted you're here. Perhaps you'll make sense of this strangeness." Her green eyes darted to the window, where the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. Beatrice gestured for them to sit, pouring tea from a silver pot with hands that trembled slightly. "It began 3 months ago," she said, her voice low, "after we decided to sell the manor. The estate's upkeep is ruinous, and Edmund wishes to start anew with Clara. But since then, the house, it's as if it objects." She described footsteps in empty corridors, chandeliers swaying without wind, and a cold that seeped into rooms despite blazing fires. Last week, a maid had fled after seeing a figure in white gliding through the gallery. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes flitting between her hosts. Beatrice's fear was genuine, but there was a brittleness to her composure, as if she hid something. Edmund's jaw was tight, his fingers drumming on the armrest, while Clara's brightness seemed a mask, her gaze lingering on Edmund with a mix of affection and unease. "And you've seen nothing yourselves?" Miss Marple asked, her tone mild but piercing. Clara hesitated, then spoke. "I thought I saw someone in the garden last night. A woman, pale, in a long dress. But when I looked again, she was gone." Edmund snorted, but his eyes flicked to the window, betraying a flicker of doubt. Dinner was served in a dining hall that dwarfed the four of them, the long table set with crystal and silver that gleamed under candlelight. The meal roast pheasant and glazed vegetables was exquisite, but the atmosphere was taut. Miss Marple steered the conversation to lighter topics, probing gently. She learned that Edmund managed the estate's finances, a task he loathed, while Clara, a painter, had come to Thornwick seeking inspiration but found the manor oppressive. Beatrice spoke of the Harrow family's history, her voice proud yet tinged with melancholy, as if the weight of centuries rested on her shoulders. As the desert plates were cleared, a sudden scream tore through the manor, high and piercing, like a shard of glass. The room froze. Beatrice's cup clattered to its saucer, and Edmund leaped to his feet, his chair scraping the floor. "That came from upstairs," he said, already moving toward the door. Miss Marple followed her steps, brisk despite her age, her senses alert. The scream had come from the east wing, where the family's private quarters lay. The corridor was dim, lit only by flickering sconces, and the air grew colder with each step. At the end of the hall, a young maid Putley, Miss Marple recalled, stood trembling, her apron clutched in white-knuckled hands. "I saw her," Polly gasped. "In the mirror, there a woman in white, staring right at me." Miss Marple approached the ornate mirror, its gilded frame tarnished with age. The glass reflected only their faces, but she noted a faint smudge, like a fingerprint, at its edge. "Show me where you saw her, Polly," she said gently. Polly pointed to a spot near the staircase, where the corridor branched into shadow. Miss Marple peered into the darkness, her eyes catching a faint shimmer, like moonlight on water. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure, pale, ethereal, with sorrowful eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She turned to the others, her expression calm. "Curious," she murmured, filing the moment away. Beatrice insisted. "Polly, take the rest of the night off. and the maid fled, her footsteps echoing. Edmund muttered about hysterical girls, but Clara clutched his arm, her face pale. "I told you, Edmund, there's something here." Miss Marple returned to the dining hall with the others, her mind racing. The scream, the figure, the family's reactions, all were pieces of a puzzle, each edge jagged and unclear. Beatrice's insistence on selling the manor suggested financial strain, yet her reluctance to leave hinted at deeper ties. Edmund's defensiveness and Clara's unease pointed to tensions beneath the surface, and the figure in the mirror, real or staged, added a layer of intrigue that Miss Marple found irresistible. As the evening drew to a close, Beatrice showed Miss Marple to a guest room, its four-poster bed draped in velvet, the windows overlooking the fog-bound moors. "I hope you'll stay, Jane," Beatrice said, her voice soft but urgent. "I don't know what we're dealing with, but I trust you to find out." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling with quiet determination. "I wouldn't dream of leaving, Beatrice. There's a truth here, waiting to be found, and I intend to find it." Alone in her room, she unpacked her knitting, her fingers moving rhythmically as her mind sifted through the evening's events. The scream had been real, Polly's fear genuine, but the figure in the mirror felt orchestrated, yet not entirely false. She recalled the smudge on the glass, the shimmer in the corridor, and Clara's trembling hands at dinner. Someone or something was stirring unrest at Blackthorn Manor, and Miss Marple was determined to uncover why. She set her knitting aside and opened the window, letting the cool night air flood in. The moors stretched endlessly before her, there, silence broken only by the distant cry of a night-bird. Somewhere in this house, she thought, lay secrets as old as its stone's end, perhaps older. With a final glance at the moon, half hidden by clouds, she closed the window and prepared for bed, her resolve as firm as the manor's ancient walls. Tomorrow, she would begin in earnest, peeling back the layers of Blackthorn Manor's mystery until the truth lay bare. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Dark. The first light of dawn crept through the heavy curtains of Miss Marple's room at Blackthorn Manor, painting the walls in muted greys. She rose early, her sleep undisturbed despite the previous night's unsettling events, the scream, the fleeting glimpse of a figure, and the strained faces of the Harrow family lingered in her mind like threads, waiting to be woven into a pattern. She dressed in a practical tweed skirt and cardigan, her movements brisk, and tucked her knitting into a small bag. Today, she would explore the manor and its secrets, starting with its shadowy corners. Breakfast was a quiet affair in a sunlit conservatory, the glass walls streaked with condensation from the moorland mist. Beatrice sat at the head of the table, her face pale but composed, stirring her tea with a silver spoon. Edmund read a newspaper, his eyes flicking over the pages without focus, while Clara nibbled on toast, her gaze darting to the windows as if expecting something to emerge from the fog. Miss Marple noted the silence, thick with unspoken thoughts, and broke it with a cheerful remark about the beauty of the moors. "Such a wild place," she said, her voice light. "It must hold many stories." Beatrice's spoon paused mid-stir. "Too many," she murmured, then caught herself and smiled. "The manor has been in our family for centuries. It's bound to have echoes." "Echoes indeed," Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling. "I'd love to see more of the house, if you don't mind. Old places like this have a way of speaking, don't they?" Edmund lowered his paper, his jaw tight. "It's just stone and wood, Miss Marple. Don't let last night's nonsense stir your imagination." Clara's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. Nonsense. Polly was terrified. Edmund. And I saw something too. She turned to Miss Marple, her auburn hair catching the light. You'll find the east wing particularly talkative. Beatrice stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. I'll show you around, Jane. The manor is large, but I know its corners better than anyone. Miss Marple followed Beatrice through a maze of corridors, their footsteps muffled by threadbare rugs. The manor's grandeur was undeniable. Vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows casting kaleidoscopes of colour, but decay lurked beneath. Paint peeled in forgotten corners, and cobwebs draped chandeliers like mourning veils. Beatrice's commentary was practiced, pointing out ancestral portraits and antique furnishings, but her hands twisted nervously at her sides. Miss Marple's sharp eyes missed nothing. A locked door with fresh scratches on its frame, a curtain that stirred despite sealed windows, and a faint scent of lavender, out of place in the musty air. They paused before a towering portrait in the gallery, its subject a woman with striking features, high cheekbones, dark eyes, and a cascade of raven hair. Eleanor Harrow, my sister, Beatrice said, her voice softening. She died 30 years ago, a tragedy. The manor hasn't been the same since. Miss Marple studied the portrait, noting Eleanor's piercing gaze, as if she watched the living with silent judgment. She was beautiful, she said. What happened to her? Beatrice's lips tightened. She took her own life. The family never speaks of it. She turned away, her shoulders stiff, and led Miss Marple onward. The tour ended at the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by a massive fireplace. Miss Marple's fingers itched to explore, and she seized the opportunity when Beatrice excused herself to attend to household matters. Alone, she scanned the shelves, her instincts guiding her to a section of dusty tomes on local history. One book, its spine cracked, caught her eye. Chronicles of Thornwick Moor. Flipping through its brittle pages, she found references to Blackthorn Manor, including whispers of a curse tied to a betrayal in the Harrow family. A name surfaced: Eleanor Harrow, whose death was shrouded in rumour, with villagers claiming her spirit never left the manor. As she read, a floorboard creaked behind her. She turned to find Polly, the maid from last night, clutching a duster, her eyes wide. "Miss, you shouldn't be poking about," Polly whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "The house doesn't like it." Miss Marple smiled, her tone gentle, but probing. "And what does the house say, Polly? You saw something last night. Tell me." Polly hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "It's her, Miss Eleanor. I've seen her before, not just in the mirror. She walks the halls at night, always. Near the east wing. She's angry, Miss. I feel it. Like she's waiting for something." Her voice dropped to a hush. "They say she was betrayed, that someone in the family did her wrong." Miss Marple nodded, her mind cataloguing Polly's words. "Thank you, Polly. You've been most helpful." As the maid scurried away, Miss Marple noticed a small bookshelf tucked in a shadowed alcove. One book was slightly askew, its leather cover embossed with a faint crest. She eased it out, revealing a slim volume bound in faded blue. A journal, not a book. The first page bore Eleanor's name in elegant script, dated 3 decades prior. The journal's entries were fragmented, written in a hurried hand. Eleanor described a love affair with a man named Thomas, opposed by her family, and a growing fear of someone watching her. One entry chilled Miss Marple. "I know the truth now. They think me a fool, but I see their lies. If I fall, it will not be by my hand." The final page was torn, as if ripped out in haste. Miss Marple slipped the journal into her bag, her pulse quickening. This was no mere ghost story. Lynor's words hinted at a deliberate wrong, one that might still echo in the manor's halls. That evening, dinner was tense, the clink of cutlery sharp against the silence. Miss Marple steered the conversation. To the manor's history, probing gently. "Beatrice, you mentioned Eleanor earlier. Did she love this house as you do?" Beatrice's fork paused, her eyes distant. She did, in her way. But she was reckless, always chasing dreams that couldn't last. The manor was too much for her. Edmund's glass hit the table with a thud. "Mother, enough. Let the dead rest." His tone was sharp, but Miss Marple caught a flicker of pain in his eyes. As if Eleanor's memory stirred something personal, Clara leaned forward, her voice soft. "I think Eleanor's still here, in a way. The things I've seen, felt, don't." "You ever feel watched, Edmund?" He scoffed, but his hand tightened around his glass. "You're letting this place get to you. It's just an old house." Miss Marple observed them, her mind weaving connections. Beatrice's reluctance to speak of Eleanor, Edmund's defensiveness, Clara's insistence on the supernatural each held a piece of the truth. As dessert was served, a sudden blackout plunged the room into darkness, the candles snuffed out. By an unseen draught, Clara gasped, and Beatrice's chair scraped as she stood. Miss Marple remained calm, her senses sharp, catching a faint whisper, not the wind, but a voice, soft and mournful, calling her name, Jane. The lights flickered back on, revealing pale faces and overturned glasses. Beatrice clutched her necklace, a silver cross, while Edmund strode to the window, muttering about faulty wiring. Clara stared at Miss Marple, her eyes wide. "You heard it, didn't you?" she whispered. Miss Marple's smile was serene, betraying none of her racing thoughts. "I heard something, my dear, but voices, like houses, have many sources." She rose, excusing herself for the night, her mind alight with possibilities. The journal, Polly's tale, the whisper, they were threads in a tapestry of deceit and sorrow, and she was determined to unravel it. In her room, she sat by the window, the moors cloaked in darkness beyond. The journal lay open on her lap. Words, a silent plea across the years. Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked softly, a counterpoint to her thoughts. The manor was alive with secrets, some human, some perhaps beyond. But she was no stranger to shadows, and she would face them with the same clarity she brought to every puzzle. Tomorrow, she would seek out the east wing, where Eleanor's presence lingered, and begin to trace the truth behind the whispers in the dark. Chapter 3. The locked room, riddled the morning air in Blackthorn Manor, carried a chill that seeped into the bones, as if the house itself exhaled winter. Miss Marple sat at her small writing desk, the faint light of dawn filtering through the mullioned windows, her fingers tracing the edges of Eleanor's journal. The whispered voice from the previous night lingered in her memory, not as a fright, but as a challenger clue to be deciphered. She closed the journal, tucking it into her knitting bag, and resolved to investigate the east wing, where Polly's terror and Clara's glimpses suggested answers might lie. At breakfast, the mood was strained, the conservatory's glass walls fogged with mist that obscured the moors. Beatrice picked at her grapefruit, her eyes shadowed, while Edmund sipped coffee, his posture rigid. Clara, wrapped in a shawl despite the warmth of the room, avoided Miss Marple's gaze, her fingers fidgeting with a napkin. "I trust you slept." "Well, Jane," Beatrice said, her voice brittle with forced cheer. "The manor can be." unsettling at night. Quite well, thank you, Miss Marple replied, her tone bright but her eyes sharp, noting Clara's unease and Edmund's tight-lipped silence. I thought I might explore the East Wing today. Polly mentioned it's a place of interest. Edmund's cup clinked sharply against its saucer. That wing's been closed for years. Nothing there but dust and old furniture. Clara's head snapped up, her voice soft but urgent. That's not true, Edmund. I've heard things, footsteps, voices, and Polly saw her there. She glanced at Miss Marple, a plea in her eyes. You believe me, don't you? Miss Marple smiled, her expression serene. I believe in keeping an open mind, my dear. Houses, like people, have their secrets. Shall we, Beatrice? Beatrice hesitated, then nodded, leading the way. The East Wing's corridor was narrow, its wallpaper peeling like old skin, the air thick with the scent of mildew. Sconces flickered, casting long shadows that danced like spectres. Beatrice stopped before a heavy oak door, its brass locked, harnished, but sturdy. This was Eleanor's room, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We sealed it after she passed. No one's been inside since. Miss Marple's keen eyes caught a faint glint beneath a nearby rug, a loose floorboard. Slightly raised, she knelt, her movements deft despite her age, and pried it up, revealing a small iron key. Its surface etched with a floral pattern. Curious, she murmured, holding it up. Beatrice's face paled, and she took a step back. Where did that come from? Beatrice asked, her voice trembling. Perhaps the house wanted us to find it, Miss Marple said lightly, though her mind was racing. She fitted the key into the lock, and with a reluctant groan, the door swung open. The room beyond was frozen in time, a relic of another era. A canopied bed stood draped in faded silk, its pillows undisturbed. A vanity held a silver brush and a cracked perfume bottle, its lavender scent faint but unmistakable. Dust coated every surface, yet Miss Marple's sharp gaze caught anomalies. A chair slightly askew, a curtain hem free of dust, as if recently touched. On the floor, half hidden by the bed, lay a blood-stained shawl, its crimson stark against the grey dot. Beatrice gasped, clutching the doorframe. That was Eleanor's. How is it here? Miss Marple knelt beside the shawl, her fingers hovering over the stain. Old blood, she said softly, but the fabric isn't as dusty as it should be. Someone's been here, and not long ago. She stood, her eyes scanning the room, noting a mirror with a faint smudge, like the one in the corridor last night. Beatrice, who has access to this wing? No one, Beatrice insisted, her voice rising. The staff know it's forbidden. Only I have a key, or had, until it went missing years ago. Miss Marple nodded, filing away Beatrice's agitation. Then we must ask who benefits from this room's secrets being stirred. She slipped the shawl into a handkerchief, tucking it into her bag for later study. They returned to the drawing room, where Edmund and Clara waited, summoned by a breathless Polly. The maid's eyes widened at the sight of the shawl, and she crossed herself. That's hers, isn't it? Miss Eleanor's. I knew she was still here. Edmund's face darkened. This is absurd. You're all feeding into this ghost nonsense. That shawl's probably been there for decades. Voice was sharp, her usual brightness gone. Then why isn't it covered in dust like everything else? Someone's playing games, Edmund, and I'm tired of it. She turned to Beatrice, her eyes flashing. You've been against me from the start, haven't you? You think I'm after your precious manor? Beatrice's hands clenched, her composure cracking. "You've brought nothing but trouble, Clara, stirring up old wounds, encouraging these theatrics." Miss Marple raised a hand, her voice calm but firm. "Let's not leap to accusations. A house this old holds many stories, and not all are told by ghosts. Clara, you mentioned footsteps outside your window. Could you show me where?" Clara led the group to her room, an airy chamber with tall windows overlooking the gardens. She pointed to the gravel path below. "There, last night, I heard crunching like someone pacing. When I looked, I saw her, a woman in white, just for a moment." Miss Marple peered out, noting the path's pristine gravel, undisturbed by footprints. "Interesting," she said, her tone neutral. "The ground is soft from the rain, yet there's no trace. Perhaps our visitor is lighter than we think. Call more careful." Back in the drawing room, the tension was palpable. Each glance between Beatrice, Edmund, and Clara charged with unspoken blame. Miss Marple sat, her knitting, needles clicking softly, a soothing counterpoint to the room's unease. "This room, this shawl, these sightings, they suggest someone wishes to unsettle us," she said. "But why?" "Fear can hide many motives." Beatrice sank into a chair, her face drawn. "I just want this to end, Jane. The manor was supposed to be our legacy, but it's become a curse." Edmund paced, his voice low. "It's not a curse. It's just a house, and we're letting imagination run wild." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Or someone's making sure we're too scared to stay. Maybe they want us gone." Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes flicking between them. "A possibility worth considering. But we must look at facts, not fears. The shawl is a clue, and this room is a stage. Tomorrow I'll speak with the staff and explore the gardens. Answers are here, if we look closely." As the group dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, her mind turning over the day's discoveries. The locked room, untouched yet tampered with, suggested a living hand at work, yet the lavender scent and fleeting figure hinted at something less tangible. Eleanor's journal, hidden in her bag, spoke of betrayal, and now this shawl, stained with blood, pointed to a wound never healed. Someone in Blackthorn Manor was weaving a deception, and Miss Marple was determined to find the thread that would unravel it. She retired to her room, the manor settling into an uneasy silence. Outside, the moors whispered under a crescent moon, their secrets as deep as the house's own. Miss Marple opened her window, letting the cool air clear her thoughts. The locked room was a riddle, its pieces scattered across time and memory. Tomorrow she would search for more, her quiet resolve as unyielding as the manor's ancient stones. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Past. The morning mist clung to the moors like a shroud, muffling the world beyond Blackthorn Manor's windows. Miss Marple sat by her room's hearth, Eleanor's journal open on her lap, its cryptic entries fueling her resolve. The blood-stained shawl now carefully folded in her bag, and the locked room's subtle disturbances pointed to a truth buried but not forgotten. Today she would venture beyond the manor's walls to the village of Thornwick, seeking the roots of Eleanor's story in the records of the past. At breakfast, the conservatory felt stifling despite its airy glass. Beatrice's hands trembled as she poured tea, her eyes avoiding Miss Marple's. Edmund skimmed a ledger, his brow furrowed, while Clara sketched absently on a napkin, her strokes sharp and restless. "I thought I might visit the village today," Miss Marple said, her voice bright. "A bit of history might shed light on our disturbances." Edmund's pen paused. The village, It's just a cluster of old gossips. They'll fill your head with nonsense about curses. Clara's sketch tore under her pencil. Maybe they know something we don't, Edmund. You can't pretend nothing's wrong. Voice held an edge, her eyes flicking to Beatrice, who stiffened but said nothing. Beatrice set her cup down. I'll arrange for the driver, Jane, but be careful. Thornwick folk love their legends, especially about this house. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. Legends often hide truths, Beatrice. I'm rather fond of finding them. She noted Clara's tense grip and Edmund's quick glance at his mother. A silent conversation she intended to decipher. The drive to Thornwick was brief, the moorland road winding through heather and gorse. The village was a huddle of stone. Cottages, their chimneys puffing smoke into the grey sky. Miss Marple directed the driver to the parish hall, a squat building with ivy-covered walls. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and wax, and a bespectacled clerk, Mr. Grayson, greeted her with a nod. Looking for something specific, he asked, adjusting his glasses. I'm interested in Blackthorn Manor's history, Miss Marple said, her tone mild. Particularly anything about Eleanor Harrow, who died some 30 years ago. Grayson's face tightened, but he led her to a back room stacked with leather-bound registers. Harrow business always stirs talk, he muttered, pulling a volume. From 1895, Eleanor's death was a scandal. Suicide, they said, but plenty doubted it. Miss Marple pored over the records, her fingers tracing faded ink. Eleanor's death certificate listed self-inflicted as the cause, but a coroner's note mentioned bruises inconsistent with the official story. Another document caught her Argyll marriage license for Eleanor Harrow and Thomas Varnley, dated mere weeks before her death. Thomas, it seemed, had vanished shortly after, rumoured to have fled after being accused of stealing a family heirloom. Curious, Miss Marple murmured, noting the name Varnley Clara's surname. A coincidence, or something more? Back at the manor, Miss Marple sought out the groundskeeper, old Tom, a wiry man with weathered hands and eyes like flint. She found him pruning roses in the overgrown garden, his movements slow but deliberate. You've been here a long time, haven't you, Tom? She asked, her tone conversational. He grunted, not looking up. Longer than most. Seen things in this house no one ought to. Miss Marple knelt beside him, inspecting a rose. They say Eleanor Harrow's death cursed this place. Something about a stolen heirloom, a sapphire brooch, perhaps. Tom's shears paused, his jaw tight. Folks talk too much. That brooch was Eleanor's pride, a gift from her man, Thomas. When it went missing, so did he. Broke her heart, they say. And you believe she haunts the manor still. Miss Marple's voice was gentle, but her eyes missed nothing, the way Tom's hands shook. The flicker of anger in his gaze. I believe some wrongs don't rest easy, he said, clipping a stem with force. But ghosts, that's for fools. And children, he turned away, ending the conversation. Miss Marple wandered the garden, her mind turning over Tom's words and the record's hints. A stolen brooch, a vanished lover. A death too tidy for truth. Lenor's story was a knot of betrayal, and the manor seemed to pulse with its echo. As dusk fell, a storm gathered, dark clouds rolling in like an omen. She returned to the manor. Just as rain began to lash the windows, the wind howling like a chorus of lost voices. Dinner was cancelled, the storm's fury trapping the household inside. The group gathered in the drawing room, the fire casting long shadows. Beatrice paced, her fingers twisting her cross necklace, while Edmund poured brandy, his movements sharp. Clara sat by the window, her sketchbook closed, her face pale. Miss Marple, knitting in hand, watched them, her needles a steady rhythm against the storm's chaos. "I found something today," Miss Marple said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Eleanor's marriage to Thomas Varnley and whispers of a stolen brooch. Does that mean anything to you, Clara?" Clara's eyes widened, her hand clutching her shawl. "Varnley, my family's from the north, but I don't know any Thomas." "It's a common enough name." Beatrice stopped pacing, her voice sharp. "What are you implying, Jane? That Clara's tied to this madness?" "Not implying, Beatrice," Miss Marple said calmly, "merely asking. The past has a way of reaching forward." Edmund slammed his glass down. "Enough of this. You're stirring up ghosts that don't exist. The manor's falling apart, and we're all seeing things because of it." As if in answer, a clap of thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered. In the brief darkness, something glinted on the drawing-room table, a sapphire brooch, its deep blue stone catching the firelight. Beatrice gasped, stepping back, while Clara froze, her eyes locked on the jewel. Edmund swore under his breath, his hand reaching for it, but stopping short. Miss Marple rose, her movements deliberate, and picked up the brooch, its weight cold in her palm. "Now, this is interesting," she said, her voice steady. "Brooch, I presume. Yet here it is, as if placed for us to find." Beatrice's voice was a whisper. "It was lost, stolen. How is it here?" Clara's eyes darted to Edmund, then away. "Someone's toying with us, trying to scare us." Miss Marple slipped the brooch into her pocket, her mind racing. The storm's howl masked a faint sound, a creak, like a door opening in the distance. She glanced at the others, noting their fear, their suspicion. "Someone or something wants our attention," she said, "and I intend to give it. Tomorrow I'll look into this brooch's journey. It has a story to tell, and I mean to hear it." The group dispersed, the storm's rage unrelenting. Miss Marple retired to her room, the brooch heavy in her pocket, its sapphire glinting like an eye. She placed it beside Eleanor's journal, her thoughts weaving a pattern, a stolen heirloom, a vanished lover, a death that wasn't what it seemed. The manor's shadows held secrets, some human, some perhaps beyond. As the storm battered the walls, she sat by the window, her knitting idle, listening to the wind's wail, a sound that might have been the moors or something closer, crying for justice. Chapter Wall. The seance deception, the storm's aftermath, left Blackthorn Manor cloaked in an eerie calm, the moors glistening under a weak sun. Miss Marple stood at her window, the sapphire brooch glinting on her bedside table beside Eleanor's journal. The previous night's discovery had sharpened the mystery, its sudden appearance a deliberate act, human or otherwise. Her mind, sharp as ever, sifted through the clues, the blood-stained shawl, the journal's hints of betrayal, and now the brooch, a relic of Eleanor's lost love. Today she would watch the household closely, for the manor's secrets were stirring its inhabitants into action. Breakfast was a hushed affair, the conservatory's glass streaked with rain. Beatrice's face was drawn, her fingers twisting a laced handkerchief, while Edmund stared into his coffee, his jaw tight. Clara, however, was animated, her auburn hair loose and her eyes bright with a restless energy. "We can't go on like this," she declared, setting her fork down with a clink. "The brooch, the noises, the sightings is too much. I've arranged for a medium to visit tonight. A seance, to contact Eleanor and find out what she wants." Edmund's head snapped up, his voice sharp. A seance, Clara. This is madness. You're turning our home into a circus. Beatrice's handkerchief tore slightly under her grip. I agree with Edmund. This is a respectable house, not a stage for charlatans. Clara's cheeks flushed. Respectable. This house is falling apart, and so are we. If Eleanor's spirit is here, we need to know why. Miss Marple, you'll join us, won't you? Miss Marple sipped her tea, her expression serene but her eyes keen, noting Clara's fervour and the other's resistance. I've never been one for seances, my dear, but I'm always interested in what people reveal under pressure. I'll attend. The day passed quietly, the manor heavy with anticipation. Miss Marple spent the morning in the library, cross-referencing Eleanor's journal with old family letters she found tucked in a desk drawer. One letter, written by Beatrice to a cousin, mentioned Eleanor's foolish attachment to Thomas Varnley and her refusal to break it despite family objections. Another hinted at a confrontation the night Eleanor died, though details were vague. Miss Marple tucked the letters away, her mind tracing connections between past and present. As evening fell, the drawing room was transformed. A round table stood. At its centre, draped in black velvet, surrounded by 5 chairs, candles flickered, casting shadows that writhed on the walls. Clara introduced the medium, Madame Vesper, a woman with sharp features and coal-lined eyes, her crimson shawl draped dramatically over her shoulders. I sense a restless spirit, Madame Vesper intoned, her voice low and theatrical. We must join hands and open our hearts to the beyond. Miss Marple took her seat between Clara and Beatrice, her hands cool and steady. Edmund sat opposite, his skepticism palpable, while Polly, reluctantly included, trembled beside Madame Vesper. The medium began, her voice rising in a chant, calling on Eleanor's spirit. The room grew colder, the candles flickering as if caught in a draught. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp despite the dim light, caught a glint of thin wire stretched across the ceiling, barely visible. Suddenly, a low moan filled the room, and the table quivered. Polly gasped, her grip tightening on Miss Marple's hand. Madame Vesper's head tilted back, her eyes closed. "Eleanor Harrow, speak to us," she cried. A voice, hollow and distant, answered, "Betrayed. I was betrayed, by kin, justice." Beatrice's breath hitched, and Clara's eyes widened. Edmund leaned forward, his voice cutting through the moan. "This is ridiculous. Stop it." Clara, but the voice continued, sharper now. "The truth lies hidden, in the heart of the house. A traitor among you." A candlestick toppled, and a vase on a nearby shelf rattled, then floated briefly before crashing to the floor. Beatrice shrieked, and Polly sobbed, burying her face in her hands. Miss Marple remained calm, her gaze flicking to the wire, then to Madame Vesper's hands, which twitched subtly under the table. As the voice faded, the candles flared back to life, and Madame Vesper slumped, feigning exhaustion. "Eleanor has spoken," she whispered. "She seeks justice." Clara's voice trembled. "Did you hear her?" She said, "Traitor. Someone in this family. Enough." Edmund snapped, standing. "This is a farce, and you're all fools for believing it." Miss Marple rose, her tone mild but firm. "A farce, perhaps, but not without purpose. May I examine the table, Madame Vesper?" Without waiting for permission, she knelt, her fingers tracing the underside, where a small mechanism, spring-loaded device explained the table's quiver. She stood, holding up a piece of wire. Cleverly done, but not otherworldly. Someone went to great lengths to stage this. Madame Vesper's face flushed, but she recovered quickly. The spirits work through me, not wires. You insult their presence. Clara's eyes darted to the medium, then to Miss Marple. You think this was staged. But the voice, the vase Miss Marple's smile, was gentle. Voices can be mimicked, and objects moved with practice. But the question is why? She turned to Clara. You arranged this, my dear. Care to explain? Clara's hands twisted in her lap, her voice low. I just wanted answers. I hired Madame Vesper to shake things up, to make Beatrice see we can't stay here. The manor's draining us, and I thought a séance might push her to sell. Beatrice's face hardened. You'd frighten us out of our home. For what, Clara? Money. Clara's eyes flashed. Not money, freedom. This place is a tomb, and it's killing Edmund, killing us all. Edmund's voice was cold. You've gone too far, Clara. This ends now. Miss Marple raised a hand, her voice cutting through the rising tempers. Let's not rush to judgment. Clara's motives may be misguided, but the phenomena here aren't all tricks. That voice, staged or not, spoke of betrayal, a theme in Eleanor's journal, and last night's brooch wasn't part of your plan, was it, Clara? Clara shook her head, her face pale. No, I swear it. Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. The séance was a deception, but the chill in the room, the fleeting shadows she'd glimpsed during the blackout, felt real. Eleanor's presence, or someone's clever imitation, was pushing the household toward a breaking point. We've learned something tonight, she said. Someone wants us to fear Eleanor's ghost, but fear hides truth. I suggest we all rest and consider what we've revealed. As the group dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, examining the room. The wire led to a corner where a small panel in the wall, barely noticeable, suggested a hidden space. She didn't open it, not yet, but marked its location. In her room, she sat by the fire, the brooch and journal before her. The séance had been a performance, but its message echoed Eleanor's words. Betrayal by kin. Clara's confession explained part of the charade, but the brooch's appearance and the genuine unease in the manor pointed to a deeper game. Outside, the moors were silent, the storm's echoes gone. Miss Marple's knitting lay untouched, her thoughts weaving a pattern of deceit and sorrow. Tomorrow, she would explore the manor's hidden spaces, starting with that panel. The truth was close, its edges sharp, and she would grasp it with the same quiet tenacity she brought to every puzzle. Chapter 6. The Secret Passage. The morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds over Blackthorn Manor, casting a pallid light across its stone facade. Miss Marple sat at her window, the sapphire brooch and Eleanor's journal on the table beside. Their secrets as tangled as the ivy clinging to the manor's walls. Last night, as séance, with its stage theatrics and Clara's confession, had peeled back a layer of deception, but the genuine chill in the air and the brooch's mysterious appearance suggested a deeper truth. Today, Miss Marple would probe the manor's hidden corners, starting with the drawing-room panel she'd noticed during the séance at breakfast. The conservatory was a study in tension. Beatrice's face was etched with exhaustion, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup, as if seeking comfort in its warmth. Edmund's eyes were bloodshot, his ledger abandoned, while Clara sat apart, her sketchbook closed, her gaze fixed on the misty moors. Miss Marple broke the silence with her usual cheer. A fine morning for exploring, don't you think? Like to see more of the manor's nooks. Old houses often hide their best stories. Beatrice's cup rattled in its saucer. There's nothing to see, Jane, just dust and memories. Edmund's voice was curt. Let her poke around, mother. Maybe she tired of this ghost hunt. His glance at Clara was sharp, but she didn't meet his eyes. Clara's voice was soft, almost defiant. I think Miss Marple's right. This house is hiding something. I'll help, if you'd like. Miss Marple smiled, noting Clara's shift. From instigator to ally. That would be lovely, my dear. Let's start with the drawing room. After breakfast, Miss Marple and Clara returned to the drawing room, its velvet drapes drawn to dim the light. The table from the séance still stood, its black cloth removed, revealing scratches on the wood fresh, not weathered. Miss Marple's fingers traced the wall where she'd seen the panel, a faint seam barely visible behind a portrait of a stern Harrow ancestor. She pressed gently, and with a soft click, the panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage, its air dank and heavy. With the scent of old stone, Clara's breath caught. I didn't know this was here. Where does it lead? Let's find out, Miss Marple said, her tone calm but her eyes alight with curiosity. She produced a small torch from her bag, its beam cutting through the darkness. The passage was cramped, its walls lined with rough stone, cobwebs brushing their shoulders as they moved. Clara followed close, her footsteps hesitant but determined. The passage twisted upward, ending at a heavy trapdoor. Miss Marple pushed it open with effort, revealing a dusty attic cluttered with crates and forgotten furniture. A single, grimy window let in a sliver of light, illuminating a locked chest in the corner, its brass fittings tarnished but intact. Now, this is interesting, Miss Marple murmured, kneeling beside it. The lock was sturdy, but a hairpin from her bag proved sufficient, her deft fingers coaxing it open. Inside were letters, yellowed and brittle, tied with a faded ribbon. Miss Marple scanned them, her heart quickening. They were from Thomas Varnley to Eleanor, written in the months before her death. His words were ardent, promising a future despite her family's opposition. But one letter stood out. They know. My love, they'll stop at nothing to keep us apart. If I must flee, it's to protect you. Another document, tucked beneath, was a marriage certificate, not the one from the village records, but a secret one, witnessed by a local priest, confirming Eleanor and Thomas's union. Clara peered over her shoulder, her voice hushed. They were married in secret. Why hide it? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. To protect something or someone. Look at this. She held up a small locket, its silver surface engraved with a rose. Inside was a miniature portrait of a child, no more than a year old, with Eleanor's dark eyes. Eleanor had a child, Clara, and someone went to great lengths to erase that fact. Before Clara could respond, a chill swept through the attic, the window rattling despite its latch. The trapdoor slammed shut, and a shadow moved in the corner. A figure, pale and translucent, with Eleanor's features from the portrait, her eyes, sorrowful yet piercing, locked onto Miss Marple's. Clara gasped, clutching Miss Marple's arm, but the figure raised a hand, pointing to the locket, then faded into the dust. Miss Marple's pulse raced, but her voice remained steady. Eleanor's guiding us, it seems. Or someone wants us to think so. She pocketed the locket, her mind cataloguing the apparitions, timing to precise, yet too vivid to dismiss. They returned to the drawing room, the trapdoor creaking as they descended. Beatrice and Edmund were waiting, summoned by Polly's nervous report of their absence. Beatrice's eyes widened at the sight of the locket. "Where did you find that?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "In an attic, behind a hidden passage," Miss Marple said, holding it up. "It seems Eleanor left more than memories. A child, perhaps." Edmund's face darkened. "This is nonsense. You're digging up old scandals to what end? To torment us?" Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Torment, Edmund. This is about the truth. If Eleanor had a child, someone hid it. Maybe that's why she's haunting us." Beatrice's hands shook, her cross necklace glinting as she clutched it. "Enough. I won't have my sister's memory dragged through the mud. That locket means nothing." Miss Marple's smile was gentle but unyielding. "It means everything. Beatrice, a child changes motives, legacies, even hauntings. I'll keep this safe and look further. The manor's secrets are speaking, and I'm listening." The group dispersed, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Miss Marple lingered, her fingers tracing the locket's rose engraving. The attic's discovery confirmed Eleanor's secret marriage and hinted at a hidden heir. But the apparition staged, or spectral, suggested someone was manipulating the narrative. Back in her room, she placed the locket beside the brooch and journal, her knitting untouched as her thoughts wove a pattern of betrayal and loss. Outside, the moors lay silent, their shadows lengthening under a fading sun. Miss Marple stood at her window, the locket's weight a reminder of Eleanor's untold story. The secret passage had revealed a piece of the puzzle, but the manor's heart held more. Tomorrow she would confront the living, for the dead had spoken, and their truth was close enough to touch. Chapter 7. Motives and Masks. The dawn over Blackthorn Manor was muted, the moors veiled in a fog that pressed against the windows like a silent conspirator. Miss Marple sat by her bedside table, the sapphire brooch, Eleanor's journal, and the locket with the child's portrait arranged before her. The secret passage and its revelations had tightened the web of the manor's mystery, pointing to a hidden heir and a betrayal that lingered like a shadow. The apparition in the attic, whether spirit or ruse, had sharpened her focus. Today she would probe the living, for their motives were as tangled as the manor's hidden corridors. Breakfast was a sombre affair, the conservatory's light dimmed by the fog. Beatrice's hands were steady, but her eyes hollow, as if sleep had eluded her. Edmund's fingers tapped restlessly on the table, his ledger ignored, while Clara sat with her arms crossed, her gaze defiant yet weary. Miss Marple broke the silence with her usual calm. "I've been thinking about Eleanor's locket," she said, her tone light. "It suggests a child, hidden from the family. That changes things, doesn't it?" Beatrice's fork clattered to her plate. "It changes nothing, Jane. Old trinkets don't rewrite history." Edmund's voice was sharp. "It's a distraction. We're drowning in debts, and you're chasing fairy tales." Clara leaned forward, her voice low. "It's not a fairy tale if someone's using it to scare us. That locket didn't appear by magic." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, noting each reaction. "Quite right, Clara. Things don't appear without hands to place them. I'd like to speak with the staff, today, Polly, perhaps, and old Tom. They see more than they say." Beatrice nodded stiffly. "As you wish. But don't expect much. They're loyal, but simple." Miss Marple began her inquiries in the kitchen, where Polly scrubbed pots with nervous energy. The maid's eyes darted to the door as Miss Marple entered, her voice gentle. "Polly, you've been here through many seasons. Have you ever heard talk of Eleanor's child? Polly's cloth paused, her hands trembling. Not a child, Miss. No, but there's stories. They say Miss Eleanor was wronged, that someone in the family turned against her. I've seen her, you know, not just in the mirror, in the east wing, near that locked room. She looks at me like she's asking for help. Miss Marple nodded, her mind cataloguing Polly's fear. And have you seen anyone else near that room? Someone living, perhaps? Polly hesitated, then whispered, I saw Clara there once, late at night. She said she was lost, but she looked frightened, like she was hiding something. Thanking Polly, Miss Marple sought out old Tom, finding him in the stables, mending a harness. His weathered face was guarded, but his eyes softened at her approach. You're stirring up trouble, miss, he said, his voice gruff. That locket's brought back old wounds. Miss Marple's tone was warm but probing. You knew Eleanor, didn't you? And Thomas Varnley, the brooch, the locket. They point to a story the Harrows buried. Tom's hands stilled, his voice low. I'm Thomas's brother. He loved Eleanor, but the family Beatrice, her father, they despised him, called him a thief, drove him out. When Eleanor died, I stayed on, watching, waiting. This house owes me a debt. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. A debt worth haunting the manor for. Tom's laugh was bitter. I don't need ghosts. The Harrows make their own misery. Her inquiries complete, Miss Marple returned to the east wing, drawn to the locked room. The door was ajar, a faint draught carrying the scent of lavender. Inside, she found a fresh footprint in the dust, too large for Polly or Clara, kneeling. She examined Itaman's boot, recent, the tread distinct. Someone had been here, staging or searching. She straightened, her mind racing. The footprint. Polly's sighting of Clara. Tom's grudgel, threads in a tightening knot. That evening, Miss Marple devised a trap. Over tea in the drawing room, she spoke loudly to Clara, ensuring the others overheard. I've found Eleanor's will, hidden in the attic. It names her child as heir. I'll examine it tomorrow. It could change everything. Beatrice's cup trembled, and Edmund's eyes flicked to his mother. Clara's face paled, but she played along, her voice steady. A will, that's incredible. As night fell, Miss Marple positioned herself in the library, hidden behind a heavy curtain. Her torch dimmed. The manor was silent, save for the creak of settling beams. At midnight, a soft tread approached the east wing. She followed, her steps silent, and saw a figure hooded, moving with purpose slip into the locked room. Miss Marple waited, then stepped forward, her voice calm. Polly, you can come out now. The figure froze, then turned, revealing Polly's frightened face. Miss, I didn't mean no harm. I was just looking for something. Miss Marple's tone was gentle but firm. For who, Polly? Someone asked you to search that room, didn't they? Polly's eyes welled with tears. I can't say, miss. They'll hurt me. Miss Marple guided her to the drawing room, where the fire cast a warm glow. You're safe now, Polly. Tell me, and I'll protect you. Polly shook her head, trembling. I was told to find papers, anything about Eleanor. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. Miss Marple nodded, her mind clicking into place. Polly was a pawn, manipulated by someone with deeper motives. Go to bed, Polly. We'll speak more tomorrow. Alone, Miss Marple sat by the fire, the locket, brooch, and journal before her. Beatrice's fear, Edmund's anger, Clara's defiance, Tom's grudge, and now Polly's coerced actions pointed to a conspiracy rooted in Eleanor's hidden child. The footprints suggested a man, Edmund, perhaps, or Tom, but the lavender scent and apparitions hinted at something less tangible. Her trap had worked, revealing Polly's role, but the true orchestrator remained in the shadows. Outside, the fog thickened, the moors a silent witness. Miss Marple's knitting lay idle, her thoughts weaving a pattern of greed and guilt. Tomorrow she would confront the family, laying bare their motives and masks. The truth was close, its edges sharp, and she would seize it with the quiet tenacity that had unraveled every puzzle before. Chapter 8. The Truth Unraveled. The morning light filtered weakly through Blackthorn Manor's tall windows, casting long shadows across the grand hall. Miss Marple stood at its centre, her small figure commanding despite the vastness of the room. The sapphire brooch, Eleanor's journal, and the locket with the child's portrait rested on a table beside her, each a silent witness to the secrets she had pieced together. Last night's trap had exposed Polly as a reluctant pawn, but the footprint in the locked room and the lingering scent of lavender pointed to a deeper orchestrator. Today, Miss Marple would unravel the truth, laying bare the motives that haunted the manor. She had requested the household gather in the grand hall after breakfast, a request met with wary glances but no refusal. Beatrice entered first, her posture rigid, her silver hair pulled tightly back, her cross necklace glinting in the dim light. Edmund followed, his face a mask of irritation, his hands shoved into his pockets. Clara trailed behind, her auburn hair loose, her eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and dread. Polly lingered at the door, her apron twisted in her hands, while old Tom stood apart, his weathered face unreadable. The air was heavy, the manor's silence a weight pressing on them all. Miss Marple began, her voice clear and calm, cutting through the tension. "Thank you for coming. This house has told a story of betrayal, loss, and secrets kept too long. I believe it's time we heard the truth, don't you?" Beatrice's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Edmund scoffed, his voice sharp. "Get on with it, Miss Marple. We're tired of your riddles." Clara's eyes darted to him, then to Miss Marple. "Let her speak, Edmund. I want to know." Miss Marple picked up the journal, its pages worn but damning. Eleanor words speak of a love opposed by her family, a secret marriage to Thomas Farnley, and a betrayal that led to her death. The village records call it suicide, but bruises and inconsistencies suggest otherwise. Then there's this. She held up the locket, its miniature portrait gleaming. A child, hidden from the world. And this brooch, stolen, then mysteriously returned. Someone has been stirring Eleanor's ghost door, the fear of it to drive you from this manor. Beatrice's hand clutched her necklace, her voice trembling. "What are you implying, Jane? That we're responsible for this? This madness?" Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her tone was firm. "Not all of you, Beatrice. But someone has used Eleanor's tragedy to manipulate this household. Let's start with the séance." She turned to Clara. "You admitted to staging it, hoping to push Beatrice to sell. But the brooch's appearance wasn't your doing, was it?" Clara shook her head, her voice low. "No, I just wanted us to leave. This place is suffocating us." Miss Marple nodded, then turned to Polly. "And you, Polly, were sent to search the locked room for papers Eleanor's will, perhaps. Who told you to do it?" Polly's eyes welled, her voice a whisper. I can't say, miss. I was scared. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to old Tom, whose hands clenched at his sides. Tom, you're Thomas Varnley's brother. You've carried a grudge against the Harrows for decades, believing they drove your brother away and caused Eleanor's death. Did you place the brooch to stir old wounds? Tom's eyes flashed, but his voice was steady. I've no need for tricks. The Harrows ruined my family. That's truth enough. Miss Marple picked up the locket, her voice gentle but piercing. Then let's consider the child. Eleanor's journal and the secret marriage certificate suggest she bore an heir, hidden, to protect them. The locket's portrait confirms it. She paused, her eyes locking onto Beatrice. But you knew, didn't you, Beatrice? You knew Eleanor was pregnant, and you helped cover it up. Beatrice's face crumpled, her hands trembling. How dare you, Jane? I loved my sister. You loved her, Miss Marple said softly, but you feared her choices. Eleanor's marriage to Thomas threatened the Harrow estate, didn't it? Your father opposed it, and you, young and loyal, helped him. You framed Thomas for stealing the brooch, driving him away. When Eleanor learned the truth, it broke her. She didn't take her own life, did she? The bruises, the torn journal page day, tell a different story. Edmund stepped forward, his voice hoarse. Stop this. You're accusing my mother of murder. Not murder, perhaps, Miss Marple said, her tone measured. But a confrontation gone wrong. Eleanor died, and you, Beatrice, have lived with the guilt ever since. That's why you've been staging the hauntings with Polly's help. Scare Clara away, fearing she'd uncover the truth about the estate's rightful heir. Beatrice sank into a chair, her face ashen. I never meant for her to die. We argued that night, in her room. She was hysterical, saying she'd expose us all. I pushed her too hard. She fell, hit her head. It was an accident. Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face. I've kept it buried all these years, but the house, it knows. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth, while Edmund stared at his mother, his face a mix of shock and betrayal. Polly sobbed, quietly, and Tom's fists clenched, his eyes burning. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. But the hauntings weren't all you, were they? The brooch, the locket, the apparition in the attic, those were too precise, too personal. Someone else has been guiding this, using Eleanor's memory. She turned to Tom. You're not just Thomas's brother, are you? You're Eleanor's son, hidden by Thomas to protect you from the Harrows. Tom's face hardened, but his voice was steady. My father told me the truth before he died. I came back to work here, to watch them, to wait for my chance. I placed the brooch, moved things in the night not to scare, but to force them, to face what they did. Miss Marple nodded, holding up the locket. And this was your proof. Eleanor's spirit, if she's here, wanted you found. That's why she appeared to me in the attic, pointing to this. A chill swept the room, and the chandelier flickered. A shadow coalesced near the fireplace, a figure, pale and ethereal, with Eleanor's dark eyes. She gazed at Beatrice, then Tom, her expression softening into forgiveness before she faded, the air warming in her wake. Polly gasped, and Clara clutched Edmund's arm, but Miss Marple remained steady, her eyes tracing the spot where Eleanor had stood. Beatrice sobbed, her voice a whisper. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice gentle. The truth is out now, Beatrice. The manor's shadows can rest, and so can you. Tom, you're the heir to part of this estate. The courts will decide, but justice begins here. Edmund's voice was thick with emotion. What now, Miss Marple? The manor, our family, it's all broken. Not broken, she said softly. Wounded, but healing starts with truth. You'll find a way forward. Together? As the group stood in stunned silence, Miss Marple gathered her clues, her work done. The grand hall felt lighter, as if Eleanor's forgiveness had lifted a weight. She had unravelled the manor's secrets, exposing guilt and greed, and given its ghost a voice. The truth, sharp and painful, had set Blackthorn Manor free.